Okay, I think we're live. Welcome, everybody. We have a couple people waiting already. So, I'd like to welcome everyone to the not quite impromptu anymore, since this is the third week in a row that we'll be doing this, counterclipping stream. I hope to continue doing this, and in fact, I hope to be able to bring you a special guest at some point in the next, maybe not next week, but the week after, we'll see. In the meantime, we're just going to clip some counters. What we're clipping today, I didn't bring the box down, is for King and Country. This is the latest ASL release from Multi-Man Publishing. I've got a stack of counter sheets like that of ASL things that are awaiting clipping. So I figured I would get started since I have the tray for the British vehicles ready to go and labeled, even though it was empty until literally earlier today. So we have here Brian and Husa. If I'm mispronouncing that, please tell me. And Lead Magnet, thanks for stopping by. I'd like to pronounce everybody's name correctly because I enjoy it when my name gets pronounced correctly, and it is not infrequently mispronounced. So I hope that everybody had a good Christmas, if that is in fact the holiday that you are celebrating, or a good other holiday, if it is something different. I wanted to do like a happy, Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah and blah, 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 blah. But then there's like 4 holidays where I don't know what the salutation is. So I did not want to do that and then screw it up. So I mean, there is no greater challenge in counter sorting in the world of wargaming than Advanced Squad Leader. For a number of reasons, only one of which is the sheer number of counters that one has to deal with. I've seen estimates of the number of official counters at upwards of 20,000. That may be correct, but there are also... okay, thank you for clarifying that. There are also, many non-official counters too produced by various third-party publishers. I know that Critical Hit has done counter sets for ASL, but other publishers have done so as well. And if you're doing those, then all bets are off. Who knows how many you got? So somebody is probably going to add. The shirt was a Christmas gift from my wife, so I will let her know that it was well liked. I certainly like it. Christmas wasn't bad. We did travel for Christmas, which is not a great idea, especially now when some of us are not feeling well after the traveling, and we hope that none of the elderly folks are feeling sick. So, we got to hope for the best. I am reasonably sure that everything is going to be okay, but you never know. Just got news that a good friend from high school, one of the very few people who I can say that about, to be completely truthful, her father passed away from COVID just like earlier in the week. So, we hope for the best. John Longshore, thanks for stopping by. I hope that the shout-out was okay. I felt obligated to shout out in that extreme case. So, thank you again. So the topic for tonight, and I thought about like having some people on, the trouble is it's like Christmas week, and I was not going to be able to arrange people on this kind of timetable, and yet I wanted to talk about it. So I'll give you my opinion, and then maybe we'll circle back to it with a committee at a later time. So one frequently hears, especially in the context of certain publishers, that wargames are too expensive. And I will certainly agree that there are occasions when I look at the price of a particular wargame or other type of game or whatever it is and say that's too much. That's more than I am willing to pay for that item. And that's, I believe that to be a completely reasonable statement. However, I'm also struck by a picture that circulates from time to time. And what it is it's a picture of the SPI staff on around 77, 78, 79, something like that. Now, there's two things of interest there about that particular picture and its relevance to this question. One is that there's like 25 or 30 people in that picture. And the other is the word staff. Those are not volunteers. They are not, I mean, maybe a couple of them are family members, and I don't know anything about it. But I don't believe they were family members hired in or nephews or wives or whatever. They are employees. They are paid employees. And what I find so striking about that picture is that SPI back in the day, with offices in Manhattan, no less. I mean, it granted wasn't as expensive in Manhattan today as it back then as it was today. But they managed in this tiny, tiny, tiny business to run it like an actual business and pay their employees. And there's really not very many publishers in the wargaming field that are doing that right now, to be honest. And I wish there were more. And if that means that the price of wargames, which are, assuming you're not a knucklehead, which, we're all knuckleheads from time to time, we buy stuff we don't need, you're being a wise consumer and not buying, just whatever crap comes down the pipeline. You're careful about your purchases. Wargames are a pretty high value, I don't want to say investment because it's not an investment, but you know what I'm saying. A personal, as a hobby purchase, they're high value hobby purchases, at least in principle, right? Now, something that you buy and it sits around on the shelf for 20 years, that's a little different. But if you buy it and you play it, or at least, make a fairly decent faith effort to play it, then I feel like almost regardless of what the price is, I think it's worth it. So let's say the highest, and I agree with John Longshore, and I'll circle back to this hopefully, that entry-level games should be less expensive. That's absolutely true. But another Christmas present, so somebody's going to ask about this too, is this Johnny Walker Double Black, which is quite nice. I like it. It's not a single malt, it's a blend, because that's what Johnny Walker does, but I like it quite a bit. I didn't mix these up, did I? Yep, sure did. Mixed up the Crusaders and the Churchills. And now I've dropped one on the floor, so one moment, please. All right, well, that's okay. We'll figure it out later. So, now, you know what, though? I mean, so Greg mentions that, first of all, everybody, thanks for stopping by. Greg mentions that he bought an unpunched Case Blue. And, that's a significant investment, right? But if you're going to play it, who cares, right? Let's say you paid $500. Let's do math. Hold on a second. We're going to do actual math. And I literally just set this up. By the way, I've been talking for like 6 or 8 months about doing a PC reimage, which basically means I wipe the computer and it reinstall Windows over it. I finally did that the day after Christmas. Greatly overdue. The percentage, the performance of the machine is far better. All right, so let's say you paid $500 for your Case Blue. And let's say you busted it out and set it up for 20 hours. That's because I can tell you that's it takes about 20-25 man hours to set up Case Blue, right? So we're going to now divide that by that. Now you're looking that you have gotten 20 hours of activity out of it, and all you've done is set it up, and you've gotten that the cost per hour down to about $25 an hour. Now let's say you actually play Case Blue, and let's be insanely conservative, and let's say that you spend 100 hours, let's call it 130 hours, playing Case Blue. Now I think that is absolutely not the amount of time it would take to complete the campaign. That is, you played it to a natural conclusion point. Completely reasonable, okay? Spent 130 hours at it over the course of a year or 2 or 6 months or whatever it was. Now you're down to about $3 an hour. So even by this standard, and I recognize that not everybody is going to want to use this particular standard of entertainment value per hour. Maybe you got a different standard, but even at a really, really insanely high price, like $500 a pop, you're doing okay, right? With value per hour. I mean, you can't go to the movies for $3.33 an hour. That's for sure. So now the most expensive single item that I have in my games library, as far as MSRP, right, is the Second World War Singapore. Okay. And I have not managed, unfortunately, I have not yet managed to get it to the table. That is a work in progress. It is challenging to get to the table. Let's say there are smaller scenarios, but so let's circle back to questions in the chat, so I make sure I don't miss anything. Private Public says, I don't mind paying a higher price as long as the quality is there, e.g. no errata, high quality components. Now see, no errata is hard to ask for, right? And possibly not achievable. But no significant errata, I think, is a reasonable ask. No game-breaking errata is an absolutely minimal standard. And we have seen in the last year that some companies have occasionally not come through meeting that minimal standard. Rocky Mountain Navy asks, what is an entry-level game? SCS versus OCS, ASL starter kit? Do we need coin quick start rules? So, I mean, the definition of entry-level game is going to differ from person to person, right? You know, I've been doing this for a while, and presumably most of the folks in the chat are, relative veterans, as it were. So our idea of entry-level game is probably something orbiting something that's not too complicated or too expensive or too big, right? In that sense, something like good entry-level game. Most SCS games honestly apply. I am going to say, and my feelings on SCS are a little bit complicated, so don't take this as a Gary hates SCS answer. I feel like most SCS titles are simpler than they need to be an introductory game. I think, which is not to say that they're too simple. I think they're simpler than they need to be. So, if somebody wants to step right in, and people's circumstances differ as well. So if you are interested in wargaming and want to know where to start, for example, this could be a whole video topic of its own. In fact, maybe we'll do this next week if my special guest schedule doesn't work out. So if you have somebody that's interested in wargaming and wants to get involved, and doesn't know where to start, what is the exact circumstance do they have? I mean, is there a local group? Can they find it? They want to learn ASL. Can they find a mentor or a teacher for that? If so, full ASL's no problem. And maybe they'll start with something like starter kit and then move up through the ranks. ASL is full ASL, right, is an insanely difficult game to learn solitaire, just from the ASL rulebook. It is not a rulebook that's designed to teach. It's designed to be referenced. That is fine, but that does mean that unless you start with starter kit or with the old squad leader or something like that, and at this point I don't recommend anybody start with the original squad leader to try and find a trajectory to reach ASL. Start with the starter kit. You can learn the starter kit very easily. Those rulebooks are designed to teach. The ASL rulebook is not. If you have a mentor for it, great. If you have a community, great. Don't worry about it. OCS is another one. Very difficult to learn OCS without opponents. Even if you don't have mentors per se, and I kind of did, it's pretty difficult to teach, and it's nowhere near as complicated as ASL, right? So it's not necessarily about complexity. It's about if you want to become decent at it, you need to learn more than what is in the rule book. So, John Longshore says, hold on a second. All right, Lead Magnet says it's a cost versus quality equation. Completely reasonable thing to say. postage. Private Public mentions postage for those not in the continental United States, not even continental, but the United States, and you're taking it in the shorts. I mean, in Europe, you have some options. In some places in the world, you really don't. If you're in somewhere in Australia or New Zealand, you are taking it in the dumper on shipping costs badly, and there's like no remediation for that at all. You are just hosed. You're just going to eat those costs. So I feel very bad for those folks. Somebody in the EU or in the UK or somebody like that at least can get stuff from some publisher through some outlet like Second Chance Games or something like that. That is a thing that has to be figured out, but it is a thing that is outside the control of publishers, right? Publishers have to set the prices based on what they can sell them for. And if for some areas, the costs of shipping or VAT or whatever it is, or import duties, make that untenable, then there's not much the publisher can do about it at this point. We're not talking about, companies that are buying congressmen left and right here. So I think we're okay. I think. All right, I think we're okay now. I think. Sorry about that. Okay, so, that was, I think that was OBS flaking out on me on my side, actually, and not anybody's internet, even mine. So, SW, thanks for stopping by. So, anyway, apologies for the hiccup. Things happen, So, where were we with the game pricing discussion? So I guess what I'm trying to say is, I am okay if the prices on games are higher in such a way as to cause me to buy fewer games. I'm okay with that because I like many of us buy more games than I can really deal with, right? And I'm working on a sale. By the way, I've started filming the stuff for the new sale, so it might not be launching this week, but if it doesn't launch this week, it should launch next week. So stay tuned for that. So, I mean, as somebody that's paid highest price I've ever paid for about $250, I think, in like actual cash, right? Not part of a trade or something like that. I think about $250 is the most I've ever paid. And one of those games that's in that neighborhood is 1985 Under an Iron Sky, and I think decided, although you never know, I could change my mind. 1985 Under an Iron Sky doesn't even show up on eBay very often. I think I'm gonna sell it. So SW asks, how are publishers going to adapt to escalating shipping fees? Now, somebody that is involved in the publishing side of the business can certainly provide a much better and more comprehensive answer than I can. But what I think the net effect is going to be is it is going to drive production to offshore sources like China in an effort to keep prices down, just because the publishers understand that shipping costs are going to be part of their, the reality that their customers deal with. I do kind of expect that we're going to see, maybe not in the next couple of months, but in the midterm, I think we're going to see increase in the cost of shipping through the post office, shipping parcels through the post office. For those who are curious, by the way, I looked into this. You are not supposed to ship games by media mail. Now, if it's an RPG, meaning that it's a book, I think you can get away with it. If it is a board game, you are absolutely not supposed to ship it by media mail, and if they catch you, you will get in trouble. So bear that in mind. So the Second World, the highest retail prices in the hobby that I'm aware of are the stuff from the Second World War series from Diffraction Entertainment. And well, you know, whether you think those prices are justified or not, I will say that you get a lot in the package. And while the counters are thin, they are, I mean, noticeably thin. I mentioned this in the unboxing video. They are, in all other ways, absolutely perfect. There are no center nibs. They come cleanly from the sheets. There are no registration issues. They're just a little thin. You get a crap load of material, and their ongoing support for their games is very good. You end up on a mailing list, and I get regular updates from that group for updates to the Vassal modules and stuff like that. So their support is real strong. Now, I mean, it is a Europa derivative system, and we're going to have to circle back to that on another day, I think, with Europa. But I'm actually better positioned to do that now because I actually have 2 Europa games that are sitting here, and I'm actually a little bit thinking about picking up Balkan Front because I can get it relatively inexpensively. But we'll see. We'll see how that goes. And so one needs to be comfortable with that notion of a Europa-derived system. But that doesn't mean that that's a problem per se. After all, OCS is on some level, admittedly a fairly vague level, a game that is an answer to Europa. There are a number of features of that system that are there because of the way things worked in Europa, or didn't work in Europa, as the case may be. So here's the deal with Reuben James. Thanks for stopping by. So Pacific War is pretty much just waiting on Mark Herman. Here's the question, and I don't know the answer to this. Mark was on the other side of the country when everything got locked down for the pandemic. And he is away from his materials for some of his in-development projects. I don't know if Pacific War is on that list or not. So what that means is that I still have, I think, a reasonable amount of hope that it will show up in 2021, that it will ship in 2021. I don't consider that an absolute certainty, however. Considering that we might still be messing around with this pandemic nonsense for at least another 6 to 9 months is my honest guess. Well, I mean, so we have 2 different, Jeffrey, thanks for the question. So we have 2 different shipping questions, right? We have the problem of international shipping, and we have the problem of domestic shipping. The problem of international shipping is, to some extent, a solvable problem because some publishers, at least, have taken the extra step of making an arrangement with some publisher, some retailer or distributor elsewhere in the world to get them large quantities of their games, and then they become the point of contact for that company. So GMT, I've done that several times in the last couple of days. GMT has an arrangement, for example, with Second Chance Games, and Hexasim, in turn, a French company, has an arrangement with GMT to be the U.S. distribution point for their games. The Australian Design Group has an arrangement with Compass Games to be the American distribution point for their games, right? So, on a case-by-case basis, this problem of international shipping can be alleviated. The problem of U.S. domestic shipping, anybody else's domestic shipping, I got no clue. You ask somebody else. But U.S. domestic shipping right now is, I mean, if you're shipping through the U.S. Post Office, generally speaking, to ship board games, it's not that expensive, right? You could ship a standard-sized board game in a USPS flat-rate box, and it costs $15.05, and that's that. Now, if it's a big game or something like that, then it might be more expensive. But also, if I'm in Ohio and I'm shipping to Indiana, I might be able to get a regional rate box. And it'll cost less than that $15 too. So right now, the bigger problem is the post office has warehouses full of crap that they can't get out because I don't want to get into the politics of it, but basically the U.S. Postal Service is hosed right now, and a lot of its holiday volume and a lot of it's compounded by pandemic volume and the fact that they seem to be unable to hire anybody or pay anybody overtime. So I know that I had several things in the shipping pipeline at various places. This was one of them, actually, for King and Country. There'll be an unboxing video of this, by the way, the first week of January. But this thing was in the shipping pipeline for like an extra couple of weeks. I should have got this quite a while ago. I had one of the earliest pre-orders in for this, and it got paid for right away, and it took a month to get to me. And that's not Multiman's delay. That's the post office, right? I got two other things at least that are showing up. By the way, this showed up today, which is awesome, and the second one as well. They don't have the counters with them, but it's cool to have the magazine, if nothing else. And if I really want to play Burnside Takes Command, I can make my own counters for that, should that become necessary. I mean, there's kind of two sides to that question. We are going to have to all make that decision, right? Is it worth... So the other thing is, John, you're in Michigan, right? You can order a game from the EU, probably, and not worry about extra shipping, because whoever it is in the EU really wants to have some kind of outlet handling their stuff in North America for the U.S. and Canada, right? Whether that's in Canada or the U.S. or whatever, but the U.S. is a huge market. U.S. publishers are less apt to make the same decision for Europe. Some of them have, and that's great, but not all of them have. And they're even less likely to have some kind of arrangement like that for example, Australia, where you're just hosed. You're just paying a stupid amount of money. If you order something from MMP, you're going to pay like $80 or $100 just for shipping. So, I mean, it's been so in the early to mid 90s, I visited somebody who running this out of his basement was the U.S. distributor for Games Workshop's historical lines. Now, if you're a gamer in the U.S., you may ask the question: Games Workshop makes historical miniatures? I don't know if they do anymore, I guess, but they did at the time. And it was years after I had ever seen any such thing in a store or even a catalog. But they had a guy doing the distribution of that, so you could get them. John mentions that MMP needs to put the skirmisher on drive-through. So a couple things on that. I'd love to see that, and I completely agree. B, there is talk of reviving the skirmisher, which I would completely sympathize with. And I think there's a lot you could do with that format, too. So, for example, they decided when they recreated Stonewall Jackson's Way as Stonewall Jackson's Way 2, it was decided not to include Stonewall's Last Battle in that kit. This was, I believe, maybe an understandable error at the time, but now I think it's an error because chances are pretty good we're never going to see Stonewall's Last Battle again. And the thing is, it's like a half a counter sheet, right? It uses one of the maps from Stonewall Jackson's Way, so the map's in there already. So what I would love to see them bring the skirmisher back for is to do stuff like that, to say, okay, so here's a skirmisher number 3, or whatever you want to call it. Oh, and by the way, here is an extra module for Stonewall's Last Battle, which is pretty much just half a counter sheet. So, Husway says, MMP putting PDFs of the magazines is fantastic. C3I should do the same. Yeah, I actually agree with that too. However, I will note that if you go to the C3I Ops Center, quite a lot of the old C3I content is available in electronic form on that website just to download. So bear that in mind, including all of the Great Battles of History stuff, which of course is a big thing for me. I will mention, just so everybody gets excited about this, there is in the next sale video, there are OCS games, there are Great Battles of History games, there are Great Campaigns of the American Civil War games. So I am divesting myself of none of that, but all that will be in the sale. Ruben says he has a copy of the old Victory Games version of this. I'm not sure what we're talking about. I guess I will mention, though, that I have decided to sell that copy of Victory Games Peloponnesian War. I don't need a second copy of it, frankly. So there's that. All right, I am going. I don't have my Be Right Back card. So I am going to go grab that bottle of water I put into the fridge for exactly this occasion, and I will be right back in about a minute or so. Okay, so another thing that I want to mention is the publisher's pre-order methodology, right? So GMT has their P500 system, for example, and so they know, to within some margin of error, GMT knows that a certain amount of those games will already be sold. Now, every publisher is doing this a little differently, right? So, Decision takes pledges. GMT has P500. Compass and Multiman do pre-orders. In Compass's case, MMP does not charge you until it's ready to ship. Compass will do it either way. You can either pay for it now or pay for it when it's ready to ship. And then Decision, I've never pre-ordered anything from Decision, and it's not clear to me from looking at the webpage how it even works. So as much as I'd like to just sit here and drink whiskey all night, I need some water as well. I will tell you this. I strongly prefer to have my Wargames stuff available in electronic format. It is not generally... I don't generally like to use the electronic version at the table as a reference. I prefer to use the physical book, although the electronic version has the advantage of being searchable, which sometimes is useful. But for just rules reading, I greatly prefer to do that on my tablet and not with the physical book. So I really like to have things in electronic format, and I do resent it a bit when a publisher does not make their stuff available in electronic format. Back to the pre-order system. Everybody handles this a little bit differently, right? So GMT, for example, puts something up for P500, and it is at least nominally to gauge interest in that thing, all right? So they don't know, is it going to make its number or not? MMP kind of does the same thing, but at the point at which GMT puts something up for P500, it can be like a notional product, right? It could be just an idea, and we've seen that. And then eventually, if it hits its number, it gets developed, and everybody's happy with it. If MMP puts something up for pre-orders, it is done. It is done to 2 decimal places, right? There might be some really minor layout things that have to happen or something like that, but it is ready to go at the point at which Multiman puts it up for pre-order. That is true of all of their series, the real series games. It's true of OCS, it's true of ASL, it's true of SCS, it's true of... it will be true of Line of Battle. There's only 3 examples of that. But maybe not the international game series as much, to the extent that MMP has had issues with their games. Most of those games have been part of the international series, and some of those issues may be due to translation issues. But and that's another thing is you could put bookmarks you could put physical bookmarks in a physical book too. Oh, John Longshore, I'm sorry to hear that you have ordered Total War. I guess pretty much everything you need to play Total War is in circulation somewhere. But I can also tell you that I know a certain individual who has literally offered a huge pile of money to those people to just buy Total War and release it, and they said no. So GMT and P500 Untrued is ready to go. Yes, absolutely. Maybe I wasn't clear when I said that. In GMT's case, a lot of times when they put something on P500, it's just an idea. Things absolutely do languish. When MMP puts it up, it is ready to go. I might have stumbled over that. Compass doesn't have a pre-order barrier. So Compass says, we want to produce this. It's reasonably far along. It's not just an idea anymore. It has seen some development, and we have confidence in it. Then they will put it up for pre-order, but they also don't wait for it to hit some number before they go and print it. ID Jester, thanks for stopping by. Yes, that's why. Why do you think I have these Popeye-like forearms? I mean, I should get anchors tattooed on these things. My wife will kill me if I do that. So I mean, everybody has to decide what their breaking point is on price, right? Unfortunately, my tastes in Wargames are such that $60 price point that is high for some people, and it's not about them being cheap. It's about what they think they're going to get out of it and what their value on their time is. A lot of the games I'm interested in are more than that. Not all of them. I mean, if you say pre-order, a lot of times you get a decent discount for pre-ordering too, and that can make a difference, right? I think the pre-order for Pacific War, for example, which is going to be a huge game, right? It's 10 counter sheets, 2 mounted maps and an unmounted map, 5 rule. I don't know what's in there. It's going to be a lot of stuff. 4-inch box. It's going to be as deluxe as Wargames get, and really in the neighborhood of as big as Wargames get. And it's under $100 from GMT if you pre-order. It's going to be more than that if you wait. So that makes a big difference. The Ritz Mister, I am clipping the counters for King and Country, the latest ASL release from Multiman. Casey, thanks for stopping by. How many folks read the rulebook before making a purchase? I don't. However, if the rulebook is available, then I will absolutely peruse that rulebook a little bit. I don't really do that. That's not really something I can do. I have to find my poofy shirt to wear for you, though, Alan. So, if maybe you thought I didn't have a poofy shirt, but you would be mistaken. Not only 11 counter sheets, I don't know if it's 11 or if it's 9 or 10, something like that. It's big. But it's going to be big, and I'm pretty sure they're going to end up being half-inch counters, too. So they're going to be, some people consider those quite small. in my sort of dream interpretation of Pacific War, it would be 4 maps instead of 2 with double-size hexes, and the ship counters would be 1/2 by 1 inch, so that you could fit all of that info on the same side. That would be my preference, but I don't believe we're going to get that. But, you know, just having it back in print is going to be awfully nice. And it will probably hang around for a while, too. I'm going to guess that with the pre-order numbers being very high, the print run will be fairly high, and it'll be available for a couple of years from GMT. But you never know. Sometimes these things evaporate real quickly. So, just received Reluctant Enemies, Burma, and Tunisia 2. So, Reluctant Enemies is actually kind of a neat little game. It's very much the OCS as puzzle type of situation, right? That I talked about last week. That is something that appeals to me, so that doesn't bother me. But it's maybe because that puzzle is so clear on there, the one map with a couple different routes that you could plausibly go. The puzzle is very clear, which is not to say it's simple to solve, because dice rolls are involved as well. So I think you have made a couple of really good purchases. Reluctant Enemies does also contain the little starting guide for OCS, which is definitely worth reading. OCSdepot.com does have a continuation of that starting guide as well. So that's another thing. GT Pony Rider, thanks for stopping by. He's a series player, GCACW, BCS. It's too expensive to buy stuff now on the that looks interesting premise. So I can sympathize with that too, and it's certainly tempting to when you're like trying to focus your hobby time on specific things to say, hey, I want to focus on OCS, for example, to take one series, because it's one game system that you have to learn. It might be more than one that you have to buy, but you only have to learn one game system, and you can get a lot of different play situations out of it. That is very attractive, and there are a huge number of... I mean, this would be worth a video on its own, too. There are, like, tight series, like OCS, where there's a series rulebook, and everything follows the series rulebook. And there are loose series, like the Simonich operational games, for example, which I think are fantastic games, but they're all a little different. Are they a series? I and many other people have called them a series some of the time. They certainly all have a number of related concepts in the rules, related mechanisms, but they're not a true series. They're not marketed that way. There's no series rulebook. They share a family of features rather than sharing specific rules. So maybe they're not. So there's kind of like tight series and loose series and completely mechanically heterogeneous series, like the Great Statesman series, for example, from GMT, all of which are completely different, and they only share some vague theme of having politics in the game. And at least two of which, and maybe the third, I think is a pretty good game. So, somebody asked... all right, let's see. Dan asks, do I have a favorite from Compass Games? Have I tried No Peace Without Spain? No, I have not tried No Peace Without Spain. I do have it. I would like to try it, and I think eventually that will happen, but it has not happened yet. It does have a fairly good reputation. Did I put out the Game of the Year yet video? Maybe not. Well, stay tuned for that. The Compass game that I've played the most in 2020, I will tell you straight up, is Stellar Horizons by a lot. There are... another thing, actually, I haven't brought this up yet. Hopefully, folks got Wargames for Christmas. So my family is confused by Wargames, and they have this weird idea that you should never buy anything that they asked for or will like. So I very seldom get Wargames for Christmas, and I believe that has happened 3 times now. And very interestingly, it has always been a Compass Games product. This year it was Interceptor Ace, which there'll be an unboxing of at some point next year at this rate, because I've already got unboxing stacked up for the first 3 weeks of 2021. I was very happy to get that. Now, my side of the family is a little more comfortable buying me books for some reason, so I got 2 more volumes in the Samuel Eliot Morrison Naval History of the Second World War. Very excited to get those. That's always nice to have. One year I got the Napoleonic Atlas from West Point, which was great. So from Compass, though, so what have I played from Compass? I played Stellar Horizons, which, again, I'll let the video that's come and talk about that. I've played a little bit of CSS, which I like. I like CSS quite a bit, and I would like CSS to return to the topic of World War II, which is, so I'm thematically interested in it instead of some Third World War thing. I'm a big fan of their upcoming titles that are revisions of older games, including the Victory Games Civil War, which is in the works, the Joe Belkowski Korean War, which is in the works, and the Frank Chadwick Third World War, which is in the works. Two of those should be out this year, by the way. Civil War, I don't necessarily expect to see till next year. So, what else from Compass? I don't have the whole spreadsheet in front of me here. I'm looking at the CSS games that I have, and then I have a couple things over here. I will tell you that Brotherhood and Unity looks really good. I haven't had the chance to play that either. That would probably not be the case. I probably would have gotten to play it had there been a Vassal module when it released, but there wasn't. I think there is now. Balance of Powers, World War I game. For some reason, Compass has a boatload of World War I games. And not just like strategic level World War I games, like high level strategic World War I games. They have a bunch. And several of them actually look pretty good. The one I've played is Balance of Powers, and I liked it quite a bit. There's some physical component issues that I have, but it's a pretty good game. I did get socks, too. Everybody gets socks. It's just a guy thing where you got to get socks. All right, so John Longshore says he has the last version of King and Country. I don't think there's actually anything new in this version for King and Country. I think it's all the same stuff that was in the last printing. If it's important to you to have the counters with the slightly larger print, maybe that's something that you're worried about, but otherwise it's exactly the same as far as I can tell. You'll see in the unboxing video that mine did have a collision problem. Rising Sun 2nd Edition. I gotta look at that, because the last version of Rising Sun, which I don't have, had a bunch of extra stuff in it that I didn't have. Casey says, speaking of Compass games, their products seem very pricey. So I think that Compass is currently trying to find a balance for that, because they have started to produce some stuff in China, and the component quality has gone up like noticeably, with mounted maps and super thick counters and all that stuff. And that's a factor that has to be considered. I am on the hook for several relatively expensive things from Compass, like the Third World War thing, which is expensive, and I'm completely happy to be. I'm perfectly happy with the price that thing's selling at. Stigler says, it is so easy to have your time monopolized by a single favorite system. Well, you should talk. But yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm the kind of player who can just play one game system, but I'd like to be a little more focused than I have been. SWS, how bad has been your buyer's remorse since you've been gaming? It's much... Okay, so on the there's two questions in there, whether you realize it or not. On the one hand, there's the buyer's remorse, and on the other hand, there are the buying habits that result in buyer's remorse. And if the latter gets better, then the former has less reason to continue to occur. So, I've been gaming for a long time. I've been gaming since hobby gaming, meaning war games or role-playing games, since 1981. And with that in mind, I've gone through many phases of buying tons and tons of shit that was dumb at after the fact. Let's not spill this on the counters. However, and I still do that. I don't buy anything without the intention of playing it, but I change my mind sometimes too. So, I mean, the obvious example of something that I mentioned recently is that 1985 Under an Iron Sky, which is a big, beautiful product. I always wanted to play the Next War, and it's pretty much the new Next War. And, it's not gone yet. Maybe I'll change my mind in the next week or two, but right now I'm kind of planning on selling it in no small part because I can probably get $300 or $400 for it. So it's unpunched. So another thing I'll mention with Compass is that if you go to their event, which is canceled, unfortunately, it was supposed to have been last month, but I think the chances of Compass Expo happening in 2021, in November of 2021, I think are pretty good. They sell all their stuff for 50% off at their event, so if you make it to their event. So even if you live in Canada, as long as it's not like Saskatchewan or someplace like that, you can drive there. It's in Connecticut after all, and come home with a trunk load of games for a crazy amount of money. Now you will be somewhat hampered by whatever the exchange rate happens to be, but. John Longshore says he thinks OCS should just stay on the Eastern Front. So that's another thing that I could do an entire video on, to be completely honest. And I will definitely agree that OCS is at its strongest on the Eastern Front. At the same time, I really like both Sicily games. And I really like the North Africa stuff that I've seen. So I do have issues with Beyond the Rhine. And some of those are in fact OCS issues, but really I feel like that's just a failure of the game specific rules. You could do a couple of tweaks to the air landing rules, for example, and fix the historicity issues in Beyond the Rhine. I think without too much trouble. Whether that would improve it as a game is another question. Series games, Jeffrey, this is a great question. Series games are safe, but do they advance the hobby? And generally speaking, yes, they can and have advanced the hobby. But once they become entrenched series, then they probably have ceased to advance the hobby. So I think a series like TCS or I'm going to pick on Dean here because Dean did several of these. OCS or TCS or the Civil War Brigade series absolutely advanced the hobby. But then once it's advanced, then the series remains more or less stationary. So OCS, for example, still a thriving series, is no longer advancing the hobby. It did, but it isn't anymore. Generally speaking, but then we have the tight series versus loose series that we talked about before. So, for example, David Thompson's, whatever his series is called, with Castle Itter and Pavlov's House and the new one about the Danzig post office. Those are series games, but I think they're advancing the hobby. But I think they're also a loose series or thematic series rather than a tightly focused series along the lines of the series that the gamers pioneered, for example. How can a series hold back the hobby? I guess it could happen. I can't think of no examples. Would love for some operational war games set in the Pacific. So, I guess my question on that is going to be, do you mean naval operational? Because if so, you got one coming. If you mean land operational, that's a little harder to do. Just because of the scale. I mean, you're either dealing with small islands or you're talking about China. And it's rare for Western designers to do games about the Second Sino-Japanese War. I have one facing me right now, which is War of the Suns from MMP, which is a game that a lot of people think is flawed, but at the same time, that doesn't mean it isn't the definitive game to date on its topic, which I think it might be. It looks really interesting. It is a fascinating topic. There is a book on the subject called The Forgotten Ally, I think, which I will recommend if you're interested in reading more about that conflict. The Second Sino-Japanese War is basically the part of World War II that happened in China from 1937 to 1945. Now, when I say there's a naval operational game coming, I'm referring to Pacific War. It is an operational game. It has a strategic thing. Hey, David, thanks for stopping by. I don't know if you missed it. I was just talking to you in the context of advancing the hobby. Somebody else mentioned the OSG, Library of Napoleonic Battles, which has a crap ton of Napoleonic battles at this point. Which is another series that I like a lot, and it's one of my core series. Steel Stone, thanks for stopping by. Greg says Beyond the Rhine is pretty great. I think it is, too, after the first 5 turns. The first 5 turns don't work right. And I'll get to that at some point in a future video. John Longshore says, I never understand why someone playing a World War III land game would not consider letting the cat run across the map to simulate nuclear war. So, that's funny, but there is, and I forget which SPI title this was, but there was at least one SPI title in which there were rules for nuclear weapons that said, if nuclear weapons are deployed, douse the map in lighter fluid and set it alight. Actually, in the book, SPI was not above doing that. Another fun thing, if you have a copy of Berlin 85, read the scenarios. They are great fun just to read. OCS for Normandy. I am super interested as an OCS guy and a Normandy guy. I am super interested in that product. The core campaign seems, and it will link up with Beyond the Rhine, by the way, seems to start with the breakout rather than with the landings. But there will be scenario support for the landings as well. And I think a Normandy game has to have that, I think. But I am not at all convinced that first month on shore, grinding out that beachhead, will be fun. So we'll see. If assuming that is in the pipeline, Roland is working on it. The designer of Beyond the Rhine, I will buy it in a heartbeat. I have reservations about OCS Normandy. We'll see. I hope I'm wrong, and I have not some confidence that I'll be wrong. There are also some fixes to Beyond the Rhine from Roland on OCS Depot, so check those out. I think that those will help. Stigler says he thinks that a series that puts out a new entry every year or two and is always well regarded advances the hobby by just its existence. So, I mean, that's probably a fair statement to say that in remaining popular, this series is in some sense advancing the hobby because players are and OCS and Labatt and things like this, things that get played every year at say Consum Expo, are probably in that category of games that kind of passively advance the hobby just by kind of remaining popular. I'll buy that. Okay, the Valiant Defense series, yeah. Some shared core mechanisms, but it's still more about scale and theme as a series. That's great. And somebody had asked if series games advance the hobby. I'm not sure, David, if you caught that. And I mentioned that series, without remembering the name of the series, as one that I think is, in fact, advancing the hobby. Where something like OCS that's been around forever and really is not really introducing much in the way of new novelty anymore, as much as I like it, it has ceased to aggressively advance the hobby and the state of the art of design in the hobby. Another thing I'll mention, a small, mild step forward was taken with the physical components in Hungarian Rhapsody, the latest OCS title. Hussein says, thanks for the recommendation. He did get War of the Suns because of his interest in that theater. It's a fascinating topic. I took a History of Modern China class in college, and it's super interesting, and it was a very difficult class. But it's a really interesting, and we spent a fair amount of time on that topic, and it's really interesting. And I highly recommend investigating it, but there's not a lot of war games to do that in. War of the Suns. So there's War of the Suns. There's a couple S&T games that have been released over the years, and there's that Chinese Civil War, which is not exactly the same thing, from 3W, and there's War of Resistance, which is it's not Europa, it's the Pacific Europa. I have heard things about that make me super discouraged about that particular title. So no desire to play games where you have 1/4 factors on the counters. We're not doing that. The Marie Louise rule. So we're Nathan Lundrum. First of all, thanks for stopping by. I'm glad that you found the channel. I hope that I am helping to direct you elsewhere as well into the robust community of YouTube wargaming. Do I have any recommendations for operational Roman-era war games? This is a great question, and unfortunately there aren't many games that do operational ancients. My personal favorite operational ancients series is a series from GMT, I almost said GDW again, is a series from GMT and the late great Richard Berg called The Ancient World. There were 2 volumes in the series, The Rise of the Roman Republic and Carthage, and a 3rd volume was a long time in preparation called Thunderbolt, which is the Second Punic War, which is the Punic War that everybody wants to play because it's the one with Hannibal and Scipio and all that stuff, and crossing the Alps and the elephants and all that stuff. Mark Herman, I'm very happy to say, says that he is going to help Alan Ray, the developer of that game, finish it as a tribute to Richard. I think that's great. So I don't have any confidence that that's going to be out soon. But it's a heartbeat pickup for me. Now, if you can scrape up Rise of the Roman Republic or Carthage on the secondary market, do so. They are excellent games. Very much a product of their time, but I really like both of those games, in part because operational is what I like to play, and I love Ancients, and there's not that much operational Ancients out there. There are a couple alternatives. There's some stuff. There's a game called Trajan from, I think from Decision, but it's got a bad reputation. I might be misremembering the fact that it's from Decision. And that was part of a series, too, that you could theoretically put all the 4 different magazine games together, but the maps didn't line up right, and it was Mickey Mouse, and as you know, which might be why I think it was Decision. But I really feel like where it is at for Operational Ancients is the Ancient World series, and I would love to see that series continued. All right, so we got Labatt mentioned in here by somebody else as well. Napoleonics is what he calls the rock, paper, scissors of warfare. It's incredibly procedural and rigid, and therein lies its complexity. There's some truth to that. Jeffrey says BAR, by which he means Battles of the Age of Reason, is more complex than Labatt. However, BAR might be... I've never played either game, so I'm going by what friends who do play both games have told me. BAR might be more complex than Labatt. However, there's only one rule set, not 75 different rule sets that you have to then argue about and get confused over and decide which one you're using. And also, from what I understand, the games are constructed so well that you can basically, once you know the rules, you can basically run the whole thing off the tables and the play aids. And that's it. And you never really have to reference the rules. And if so, that's very attractive. I've heard really good things about it. It's just that I don't have enough interest in the period to get into that scale of stuff on that period. I'm looking into the Musket and Pike series from GMT, and there's a brand new fork of that coming as well. John Longshores, great point. Advancing the hobby is all entry-level games. A new 17-map bulge game is giving Grandpa something to do. So I think I saw this on Facebook. A new term for those of this inclination: hex grandpas. Land campaigns in the Pacific mostly ignored in war games, and in the Okay, so Husa says, noticing how land campaigns in the Pacific are mostly ignored in Wargames. Also the Mediterranean theater for some reason. So, yes and no. A lot of the land campaigns in the Pacific of World War II are like the island campaigns, right? So a lot of the games that we do see on those are fundamentally tactical or really low-level operational games. Most of those islands aren't big enough, and honestly, a lot of those engagements aren't considered fun. Where if it's just even the ones that I like, the CSS titles that I have and like. One has to then be willing, unless you're going to solitaire it, in which case this isn't a problem. One has to be willing to play the Japanese, where the whole point is to have it take as long as possible to get ground out of existence. But if you're going to solitaire it, who cares? And the other part of that topic is the land war in China. And unfortunately, my impression is that a lot of the best sources that one might use for that are in Chinese. And there's not a lot of Americans that can read Chinese, unfortunately. That number is increasing, of course, but there's a big design challenge there, right? So, Wardrobe, thanks for stopping by. Now, as far as the Mediterranean goes, what are we talking about? Because we're talking, Mediterranean theater covers Crete, Italy, Sicily, North Africa, Tunisia. There's a lot of games on those subjects. I personally, at one point, I think owned 11 games on the Allied invasion of Sicily alone. I did get rid of a couple of those, but I still have a fair number of them. So, and that's, and there's just been a decent number of Crete games. I think we've had a fair number of operational games in the Med. Not the most popular topic, but not the least popular topic, that's for sure. So Stigler hits it on the head here. He says, not much land in the Pacific. That's why there's no land games in the Pacific. Now, we've seen a lot of naval games in the Pacific, though. Wardrobe, thanks for stopping by if I haven't said that. Yeah, check out... so, Rise of the Roman Republic is the Samnite Wars. I think the more attractive topic of the two games is Carthage, and then keep your eyes open for Thunderbolt when it hopefully eventually shows up for pre-order. Musket and Pike, great series, but frustrating as all hell to play well. Well, that I could say that about OCS too. I'm happy to do that. Anyone on here interested? This would be Clay asking if anybody on here wants to play CNA, by which he doubtless means Campaign for North Africa. Thank you, Clay, but no thank you. I have no desire to play that whatsoever. I would actually kind of like to have a copy of it to paw through, but not to the extent that I'm willing to go buy one, right? I would like to borrow a copy to look at, just for humor's sake and historical interest, as it is in it. It's kind of a landmark game in a lot of ways. Tom D, yeah, you may have. Were you in on that conversation on Facebook about somebody who mentioned this huge list of Pacific games that are coming, and the new Bismarck game from Compass was on that list, and I'm like, ooh, man, Bismarck gets into the Pacific. It's been a bad year for Britain. Malta is rarely covered, frankly. Flat Top is a great game. It's a challenging game. It's complicated. It's difficult. It is best run with a referee, frankly. Although I think the game does a pretty good job of kind of building the referee into the game system. It's very accountanty. It's got tons of paperwork and stuff like that, but it's great. It really is great. It's not double blind. You can run it that way, and it's awesome if it's run that way. I've played it that way. But the game just played out of the box actually has a lot of that Fog of War feature built into it, and it really is great. Norman, no thank you. I do not need a copy of Campaign for North Africa, but thank you. 1978 CNA was $50 and set forever. $50 was an insane price in 1978. I'll mention, though, that gamer complaints that games are too expensive is not a new complaint, right? I mean, I can personally vouch that, not that I was around at the time, I was 4 at the time, 4 or 5 at the time, when Empire of the Petal Throne came out from TSR. This is by some reckonings, I know Ken St. Andre disagrees, but you're talking to me, so I'm going to tell you it's the second role-playing game ever created. And I said created and not published. And people complained at the time that I think it was $25. People complained that was a crazy expensive price. So, I mean, we're not talking about new complaints, right? I'm sure people complain. And at the same time, if anybody hasn't read the Greg Kostikian article called A Farewell to Hexes, I think it's called. It's about the downfall of SPI. Now, you don't have to, take Greg at his gospel word here. But there's a lot of information in there about what SPI was doing wrong. And at the same time that people were complaining their games were too expensive, they were losing money on every game. So, I mean, if we would like the hobby to continue, then companies have to stay afloat. And nobody, I mean, you are welcome to name, if you like, the person who you think is getting rich through wargaming. Because it ain't me, and it ain't anybody in any of the companies that I'm aware of. So, I mean, everybody's doing this because we want to be involved in this hobby. So, I mean, I don't think price gouging is the way it is. I think that's a facile and stupid criticism. Not that anybody here has said that, but it's something that I have heard before. I think, some companies may have better connections than others, may be able to negotiate better deals, may have better circumstances, may have some key person who is really good at some particular part of the business, such that they can keep their prices lower than other companies. But nobody's buying a yacht with their wargame money, right? So I want the companies to stay in business. I'd like the companies to actually pay people. That's one reason why I like Compass, because I know that they have actual staff that aren't like, the family. I think the family are too, but they have actual staff that aren't the family. And I think that's something that I approve of, frankly. And I would like to see more wargame companies do that. And if that means their games have to be a little more expensive, well, I'm happy. I'm happy to accept that. Now, it might mean that I buy fewer of them because they're more expensive. That's fine. But I'm completely comfortable with that as well. So if you don't like paperwork, ooh, boy, you might not like a lot of the things we've played locally here. We played Pax Britannica. That's got a lot of paperwork. I used to love Stellar Conquest? Yeah, Stellar Conquest. I had the Avalon Hill version. I loved that. That was very bookkeepy. One of the motivations for Space Empires 4X from GMT was actually to have a game like that, but cutting down on the huge amount of paperwork. It has some paperwork, but quite a bit less. So, Alan, thanks for stopping by. Hopefully, you'll be back before we can it here. I have water, so I got no reason to stop all that soon. So what else showed up? We've already covered DAC. What else is coming? We've covered the 2 issues of the Skirmisher that just walked their way in. Somebody offered them to me for a song. They're missing the counters, but I actually have the counter sheets from the first one. Unfortunately, it's the second one that I wanted because it's got the Burnside Takes Command counters. That is the Fredericksburg campaign. Steve, thanks for stopping by. Victory Games Vietnam is a meaty game, right? So don't be shocked if you hear more on the Victory Games Vietnam game from this channel. I'm unwilling to give you specifics at this time. But, I mean, that's a pretty meaty game, and I'm pretty sure there was some paperwork involved. Maybe not a ton, but there's a lot going on in that thing. And I'm not sure there's more going on in that than there is in Flat Top. But Flat Top, you got to plot your movement, stuff like that. So, I love that. Man, I love that. Great fun. One of the things we do regularly is at Winterfest is have an annual game of Flat Top that's kind of a drop-in, drop-out type of thing. And it's great fun. Just delighted to play that every year. And honestly, a lot of these operational Lair things are pretty heavy on the paperwork too. Red Storm. Another thing that will be appearing in the sale is my unpunched copy of Red Storm. It is like brand new, so stay tuned for that. We got a whole new set of people here, so I'll mention that sale video number 2 will be appearing. The plan is next week. So I have mentioned throughout the video a couple of things that will be in that, but there'll be some good stuff, including the leftovers from the last sale, but there's a bunch of additional stuff there too. So, Clay's asking, have I tried the Second World War series? I mentioned this earlier. I have the Singapore game. I would love to get to a table. Unfortunately, life challenges have kind of screwed things up this year, so I don't have the immediate prospect of getting that to a table. I would like to try it, actually. SW is asking about VG's Carrier. So, no, but I did recently, if you've been watching, you might know that I got a copy of Tokyo Express, which is a related game from the same designer, John Southard. Also, Compass has in development a game called Carrier Battles Philippine Sea, I think. That is the Carrier system in a new arena. And I'm pretty excited about that. That's one of my relatively highly anticipated games from Compass, without having any information about exactly when it is coming out. No Motherland Without. Is that the North Korea game? John Longshore has a bed of his Victory Games boxes. Most of my Victory Games stuff is still in the storage unit. A few things are back already. I just don't have any thing that's going to hit a table anytime soon. If anything does, it might be Tokyo Express, which looks pretty fantastic. I have gotten in on... I'm not the world's biggest Kickstarter guy, okay? And I've gotten in, I think, on one Wargaming Kickstarter and a couple RPG Kickstarters. And that was the new printing edition of War and Peace. There was a Kickstarter. The copies sold out very quickly, and there was some errata. New edition will incorporate that errata and be nice and shiny. And it's definitely nice and shiny. I expect that to be out this year at some point as well. I think the talk is like April or May. So I will be very happy to. That's a fine game. Gulf Strike. That's a game that I'm tempted by, actually, and you can get a copy of Gulf Strike First Edition really cheap on eBay. But I think the one you probably want is the last edition of Gulf Strike, which is the one with the Desert Storm stuff in it. Aegean Strike I have quite a bit less feel for, but I will tell you that I really feel like as time goes by, those Victory Games titles, a lot of Victory Games titles are looking like they're holding up incredibly well. They are games that would not be designed in the same way today, right? They're super high sim games. They're super groggy games. But at the same time, those are the kinds of games that I tend to like, right? I mean, I have to have the right level of interest in the topic. But, with that in mind, I'm delighted to have Victory Games Vietnam, for example, which is, according to many, still the definitive simulation on that conflict. Even though, and I say simulation intentionally because there are other games on that topic that are fairly well regarded. There's Boots on the Ground and Hearts and Minds and Fire in the Lake, and people do like those. But as a simulation, none of them are comparable to the Victory Games Vietnam. So Clay asks, do I feel designers should do video tutorials along with their rulebook to help teach their war games? I don't think that's a reasonable ask for a... I hate that language, but I picked it up at work. I don't think that's a reasonable thing to expect from a designer, to be honest. Some designers do it. Mark Herman's done some how-to stuff, for example. A few other designers have. Generally speaking, I think it would be better if, perhaps with assistance from the designer, that's fair. It would be better if people who do video tutorials make the video tutorials. People like me and people like Harsh Rules and things like that. I think that's generally better. I think designers should design, right, and not do video tutorials. SW asks, what do I look for in a game? Playability, simulation, balance, or both? Now, this is a question that's going to be... the answer to which is going to be different depending on who you ask. I talked in the last live stream. If you haven't seen that, it's available on the channel. You can go ahead and watch it. It's about 2 hours long. So it's, a good thing to do while you're clipping counters, for example. Different people have different reasons why they're doing this hobby, right? I mean, for me... I am invested in this hobby to explore the history. I may have to let the dog out here. More so than to, be competitive or win or anything like that. So a game does need to be playable. It does need to have balance to some extent. But at the same time, maybe balance isn't important. I mean, I was talking about the Pacific Island games a little while ago. Those are not balanced engagements. A lot of the battles in Great Battles of History are not balanced battles. They'll tell you that in the book. They'll say this is not radically balanced in favor of Alexander, for example. So it's different people are going to give you a different answer. I'm going to take about a 2 or 3 minute break and be right back. I'm going to shut the dog up. So give me just a moment. I will be back. Okay, we're back. Thank you for your patience. All right. Half-Assed Gaming, thanks for stopping by. Yeah, I mean, like I said, yeah, we absolutely. It's you know, you need to do video playthroughs, Stuka Joe for playthroughs, harsh rules for how-tos. Although Harsh Rules does not do a lot of like super deep war games. He's done a few, but not that much. So Patchwork Pictures, what I said does not should not be meant to imply that I demand a historical outcome. I think that's, it needs to be possible, but it can't be mandatory. And if it's super railroady, then I think what that's doing is that's taking away some of its simulative ability to explore different options. I think that's necessary. I think I want different options. John Longshore, I can tell you, I've heard that Mark Herman is like 7 feet tall, so I can't, and definitely does not have a high pitched voice. So, USA, I can tell you that there are. I mean, we have. I'm not. Certainly the oldest wargamer in our local community, but I'm not the youngest either, by a lot. So there are younger people playing wargames. As many as we'd like? No, frankly. But, it's not true to say that it doesn't happen. James Roberge, what about the future? How will computer board games evolve and become more integrated? That's a good question, and we are really... So if we're talking about integration between board games and computer games, we're really only now starting to see that as a thing that happens with these app-assisted games, for example. In terms of computer war games, I mean, I really strongly feel like computer war games, by and large, have really let us all down. Now, they were supposed to do all the heavy lifting for us and give us these amazing simulations with all the detail managed by the computer, and instead what we have gotten is extremely shallow simulations with terrible AIs and, in many cases, shabby or broken rules. And I will continue to harp on this. I am massively disappointed in the state of computer war games. I just picked up, because it's on a huge sale, the War in the Pacific Admirals Edition from Matrix Games. It's like $17 or something like that, as opposed to its normal $80. And it might, in fact, be a nice simulation. But I'm not sure I'm going to get to see it, because the interface and graphics are so bad. Much worse than they have any right to be. To be demanding $80 retail price for a game like that. I haven't given up on it yet, let me put it that way. And there's things you can do to help with like resolution issues and things. So we'll see. Flight Sim, see, that's a completely different kind of game. Is a flight sim a war game? Boy, that's a good question. I mean, I would say no, but I could be full of shit. And I would be willing to hear arguments that say I'm full of shit. So I mentioned in one of the podcasts with Armchair Dragoons, Marco Arnaudo, Marco Wargamer, now Marco Omnigamer, guy doing the puzzle videos and stuff like that, years ago had a video where he said, here's my definition of wargaming. And I felt like he's onto something, right? His definition of wargaming in that video was, it's a war game if when I play it, I feel like I'm playing a war game. And the fact is, we don't have a better definition of war game than that, right? What I can tell you is when I'm playing Elite Dangerous, which is a game I like a lot, I don't feel like I'm playing a war game. So, I mean, from that standpoint, no. See, there you go. They're not all oldsters like us. I would like to see wargaming broaden its audience. I will say that and leave it at that, because I don't particularly want to get into the politics of that, and it does become a political discussion at some point. I mean, Stigler, I'm not saying you're wrong. It might be, especially if it's a combat flight sim. If I was playing a game, I assume there to be a World War II flight sim of some kind, or a submarine simulator, like what's that thing called? That game that's on sale all the time for $3.99, I always think about buying it, I never buy it. Like a submarine simulator. Is that a war game? Yeah, I mean, probably. I would feel more like I was playing a war game playing that than playing Elite Dangerous, right? But other than its science fiction theme, if I was playing a Spitfire simulator, no, I don't think I would feel like I was playing a war game. And again, I'm not saying this is the end-all, be-all definition. I'm saying I don't think we have a better definition, right? We can name features that we associate with real war games and features that we associate with something other than real war games. But how do we codify that into a definition? While at the same time, we have to understand that there are games that are, that are not going to fit that definition. And we're going to be unhappy that this game doesn't fit the definition, or that this other game does fit the definition. And we're going to want to make exceptions, in which case we just threw out our definition. So, which is why I say I don't think it makes a difference. John Longshore, I am on my video game channel, Ardwulf Digital. I am subscribed to Das Tactic. He does a lot of good stuff. I have not watched any of his Shadow Empire stuff yet. I do like his channel, though. Apparently, XTRG is taking a break to go back to school or something like that. So, hopefully that goes well for him. Compare Good Flight Sim to, say, Fighting Wings. The flight sim, if realistic, beats holy hell out of Fighting Wings, as detailed as it is. Now, Fighting Wings, the board game, is that what we're talking about? I assume we are. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's going to be more immersive. It's going to probably be more detailed, right? Because some things, at least, if well done, can be simulated behind this, behind the curtain, as it were. I just don't think most computer war games do that for us. I mean, the one I can think of in the last couple of years being super duper disappointed with is Strategic Command. I got the War in Europe one. It sucks. It's terrible. It is if you turn that into a board war game, it would be shit. There's other examples, though, like some of the Shenandoah Studios things that are basically interpretations of board games. You could tell they were designed as board games, like Gettysburg: The Tide Turns, or their Battle of the Bulge game, or their Battle Drive on Moscow, whatever it's called. Those are pretty decent. I mean, they're light, they're simple, but that's not what we were promised. We were promised these amazing simulations, and that's not what they are. That new World War II Commander John Butterfield Battle of the Bulge game is basically that Battle of the Bulge game. So, Wings Over the Motherland. So that actually looks, now that I've looked at that looks pretty interesting, to be fair. I'm having a kind of a bad time with Clash of Arms, since I've bought several Clash of Arms products, both new and old, in the last year, and have had problems with every single one of them. As in, like, stuff's missing, or stuff's broken, or stuff just arrives scattered to the four winds inexplicably. So, I'm a little tired of having to call them up and say, hey, guys, we got a problem here. I mean, they have fixed every problem, don't get me wrong. But, so I'm, a little reluctant on Clash of Arms at this exact moment. At the same time, they're kind of, Midwestern Pennsylvania company. I would like to support them. Too deep into Wing Leader when I found out about Wings Over the Motherland. Seems interesting. And I've played Wing Leader, and I didn't think it was terrible, but it didn't really grab me, I have to say. I think it's interesting. It's got a really interesting design. I think if you are into it, there's a lot of value there. The games themselves, the boxes contain tons of value, and that's great. But the game system did not really grab me. And I played a demo of it at Origins 5 years ago or something like that. I mean, I've even got some Clash of Arms role-playing stuff. Not handy, because it's all the old Tecmo stuff, but they're interesting exploration into the role-playing side of the hobby. So we've gotten about 2 counter sheets done. Not sorted. Frankly, the lighting here, the print on these vehicles is too small for me to read in this light. So we're going to do the sorting after the fact. And I just have everything, just to fly all over the place, have all these punch counters in a little plastic bin here. Now, on the other hand, I do have the Hunters, and it's great. And I have Silent Victory, and I haven't played it yet, but it looks great. So I do have a high opinion of those. And I mean, you're simulating something a little different with a game like Interceptor Race than you would be with a flight simulator. I'm going to say that a flight simulator is about immersion, and a war game simulation is not necessarily about immersion in the same sense. And that's maybe something we'll circle back to in a future video, I think, is what we mean, and all I could talk about is what I mean by these various things. Ardwulf asks, how do I sort and store my OCS titles? I don't have it handy here, but my goal with OCS is to have all of the unit markers in the box. Okay, the game markers do not have to be. I have a generic OCS marker tray, which has, supply markers and DG markers and all that stuff. And at this point, all of my extra markers are just getting stacked up because I don't need more markers right now. But the usually, I think the only one so the problem is OCS is sitting right here. The problem is that those 1.5-inch boxes really have trouble fitting 2 counter trays in them. And mostly those games are bigger than you can fit in 1 counter tray. So games like Sicily 1, or Sicily Triumph and Folly, Smolensk, Tunisia 2. Smolensk, you can kind of almost do it. Tunisia 2, you can do it. Baltic Gap, boy, it's tough to get all that stuff in 1 counter tray. Reluctant Enemies, you totally can. So that's my preference. Looking at DAC, I am reasonably sure that I can get all of DAC into 2 or 3 trays. It is big, but it's not, nutty big in terms of counters. In terms of map space, it's huge. So in the 3-inch boxes, I almost never have a problem. Beyond the Rhine, I got that back in its box, no problem. Case Blue, jury's still out. Still going through that. I've actually stepped away from Case Blue picking through because I needed it because I was doing it for like 2 weeks. And pretty sure it's going to end up missing some stuff. We'll see how that goes. I'm also equally sure that I'm going to end up with a complete copy of Guderian's Blitzkrieg 2 out of it, which means that I am going to need to try to pick out 2 copies of GB2 because I'm going to end up with about 3 copies of it, which means that the extra 2 are probably going to get sold at some point, but we'll see exactly how that works. Rick Tofen's War is a classic, and it's not a valuable classic. That's all. It was in print for 40 years, or I don't know if it was 40 years, but it was a long time, and it's just not worth more than $5 or $10, regardless of condition. What do I think of the Slytherin Shenandoah stuff? I mentioned this earlier. The ones that were designed by people like Ted Racer and Eric Lee Smith and John Butterfield, I think, are actually quite good. Light board games adapted to video games, but they're not good video simulations, because that's not what they're trying to be. They're not these detailed. I mean, what we were promised was, the computers are going to do all the work for us and let us play these big games, and the ones that I think best give us that promise are the Gary Grigsby games. War in the East, War in the West, and War in the Pacific. Those are, I think, the best ones that feel most like deep simulated war games to me. So I've put a fair amount of time into War in the East specifically, and I like it quite a bit. I mean, the AI is not very good, but you can't have everything. And there's ways to ramp up the difficulty if that's creating issues for you. So I think we are just about done with the actual clipping for the evening. Like I said, I got a whole counter tray done and about more than another half. We got a sheet of tanks here and then a sheet of some kind of open top vehicle. I don't know what they are. Those kangaroos, actually. And then, for some reason, we got new markers. I don't know why. I think they just filled the sheet out with those. I actually have the counter sheets, most of the counter sheets from the old for King and Country as well. I picked them up for a couple bucks a piece at Winter Offensive, so I got extra British vehicles. I just don't have the single man counter sheet. Nathan Landrum asks, any thoughts on Imperium Romanum? So yeah, actually that's a good call to talk about that. Did I put it upstairs? I think I took it upstairs. Okay, so there's 3 versions of Imperium Romanum. The second one was the one I originally owned. That's Imperium Romanum 2. That was from West End Games. I want to say that the original was from West End as well. The new version is called Al Nafi's Imperium Romanum, and it is Imperium Romanum, what I'm calling Imperium Romanum 3, and it is from Decision Games. It is basically Imperium Romanum 2 with some errata built in, and it has some additional scenarios. It is a very nice game. It is very bookkeeping heavy, just so you know. There's a huge array of scenarios, and there is no campaign game. It is an operational game more than anything else. There's no campaign as in like a game with monthly turns that will let you play out the entire history of the Roman Empire, because that would be crazy. But some of the scenarios are quite long too, and can accommodate as many as at least 6 people, maybe even 7 in some cases. But there's solitaire scenarios and 2-player scenarios and 3-player scenarios, and there's like 60 or 80 scenarios in there. There's a lot of value in that box. I do think the rulebook is not as clear as it could be, so you may have to put a decent amount of effort into it to learn it. Nevertheless, I do actually feel that Imperium Romanum is quite a strong package, and it's one of the better things that Decision has come out with in the last couple of years. I do like it, and it's obviously a huge step up graphically from the old one, which, while not the most hideous game of its era, it was released in the 80s, Imperium Romanum 2. It's definitely, the counters especially were pretty bad by modern standards, so if you're into that, It's also a fairly expensive game, but possibly not any more expensive than the Ancient World games. I will say I like the Ancient World games better, but Imperium Romanum is easier to get because it's in print, and it probably will run you about what Carthage would, even though it's about $130. And it gives you a lot more scope. So if you buy Carthage, you get the First Punic War and maybe a couple little side things. If you buy Imperium Romanum, you get all the Punic Wars, you get the Civil Wars, you get the, Justinian's attempted reconquest of the West, you get this, 1,500 years of Roman history. So it really is a huge, high-value package if you find that you enjoy the system. I would like to do some video on it, actually. Looking in on the chat, we got distracted with that flight sim question. I did play the shit out of Hearts of Iron 3. The latest one is Hearts of Iron 4. I don't like it. I aggressively dislike it. I think it has... The last one felt like a war game. Hearts of Iron 3 felt... I have a complete playthrough series of Hearts of Iron 3 in the chat. You can still get it through Steam, and when it's on sale, it's probably like $3. Totally worth your time. Felt like a war game. Hearts of Iron 4 doesn't feel like a war game. It feels like a Paradox game. DCX is that flight simulator. I have no idea. I barely know what that even is. So, no information about that whatsoever. So, but yeah, I mean, it's not... Operational Ancients has traditionally not been a particularly fertile topic, right? I mean, you can look at a game like Hannibal, Rome versus Carthage, or the new Caesar, Rome versus Gaul, and those are kind of operational, but to me they lack operational flavor. That's not to say that they are bad, but because of the structure of their maps and the game space, they feel more strategic to me than they do operational, which might not be true, but that's how it feels to me. I haven't played Caesar, but I have played Hannibal, and it's a good game. It's a very good game. Totally worth your time. Operational, I mean, as far as bringing in sort of the elements of maneuver and supply and things like that attract me to operational gaming, those games lack those features. So, I never played any of the Wing Commander games, to be honest. And Lord knows I haven't bought into Star Citizen, because it is not a thing I'm willing to spend money on until an actual product is released. Let me put it that way. I am willing to do early access in a lot of ways. Another thing that I just picked up, actually, is because it's on sale too, is War Plan, which looks a lot like Strategic Command, except it looks better. And it would have to, because I was very unhappy with Strategic Command. But War Plan looks a little better. It has some stacking. You can only stack one land unit in a hex, but you can also stack an air unit in hex, so that gives you at least some additional flexibility. I'm not a fan of no stacking. I gotta tell you, I feel like it pulls away my options if I can only have one item in a space. Yeah, Petric Pictures, we've been talking about that on and off. The ones that we came up with were the old Ancient World series from GMT by Richard Berg, and Imperium Romanum, which is currently available from Decision. And there was another series, and I want to say that Trajan was one of the games in that series. I forgot to put these... Okay, there's a series called the Ancient Wars series. I'm going to share my screen here. This is... Oops. Did I just close it? This is the series from Decision that I was thinking of. The Ancient Wars series. And this is kind of operational as well. And this is like multiple games put together. And if you put them together, then you end up with something that looks relatively similar to Imperium Romanum. It's got a period style map, which is an interesting choice. And actually, a choice I kind of like. It's kind of neat. I'm not sure it works, but the bigger problem is that the various maps in the series apparently don't line up properly, and that's an issue. Series Ancient Wars from Strategy and Tactics. Okay, so you have Roman Civil War, Germania, Caesar in Gallia. These don't really look. Yeah, no, I think these are the right ones that I'm thinking of. These are from, however, a period in which I don't believe that Decision Games is a particularly worthwhile publisher in this period, to be honest. And I have a few of them from Decision in this era, and not the ancient era, but the period of Decision Games as a publisher. I'm leery of all of these, and 6.9. I mean, the BGG rankings. Who cares? 6.9. It's another one of these things. So it's got this sort of weird map projection. Like I said, it's based on actual historical maps, which is a neat idea. You could put these together and get an operational thing out of it. But like I said, these do not have a particularly strong reputation, and I would, I don't have any direct knowledge of them. I don't recommend them. Kevin, thanks for stopping by. I don't remember seeing them all in a box set, and in fact, it doesn't look like. It doesn't look like BGG remembers seeing them in a box set either. Unless they're all in with Trajan. No, that's not true. So this game, Trajan, the Ancient Wars series, is apparently the one that kind of consolidates everything together. So maybe it does work. I don't know. By all means, check it out. Marketplace, somebody wants $100 for it on BGG, which is probably cheaper than it would go for on Compass. I'd be curious to see this, but I don't have any. Like I said, I don't have any direct knowledge of it, so I don't feel competent to give you advice. Only that I would be wary of it. And I will leave it at that. I do recommend the Ancient Wars series from GMT and Imperium Romanum. I think both of those have a lot of value to offer. This thing, I don't know. Maybe, but maybe not. Who knows? All right, Patrick Picture says it's really an area that needs more designs. I agree. If you aren't foraging, scouting, setting camps, march routes, it would be neat. John Longshore gives it a 12 on a score of 100, a scale of 100. Yeah, I mean, if we had, say, something that played like the great campaigns of the American Civil War but with ancients, I'd be all over that in a hot minute. That would be amazing. I am unaware of any such project. It would be cool. And thinking about it, Caesar in Gaul would probably be a pretty good venue for that. And, I wish that we had gotten more volumes of the Ancient World series from Richard Berg. That apparently he lost interest in it at some point. Maybe it didn't sell well enough. I don't know. I could tell you that the two games that did come out are now relatively collectible. And like I said, I recommend them. All right, so anybody has last-minute questions for me? Ask them now, because I am about ready to call it a night. We are about 2 hours and 10 minutes in. So I would like to thank everybody for stopping by. We are up to 51 at the most today. That is a staggering number, once again, especially considering that I forgot to send out the social media posts because we got distracted somehow. reminding folks that this was happening. So we're going to plan for, there will be a stream of some kind that I'm planning for the next 2 Mondays at 8 p.m. Eastern. One of those, I don't know which one, may have a special guest. We'll see what happens. Both of those will be, we're going to shoot for an hour or two, like I said. But these are going well, so we're going to keep doing that. I want to get back into, there's some new things that will be hitting the channel with the new year, so stay tuned for that. If you're interested in this next wave of sale, that will be hitting with a first week of January as well. John Longshore, War for America, very much looking forward to Gilbert's game. Sounds great. I agree with Stigler. Need to stop thinking of Vassal as playing on a PC. The PC is incidental with Vassal. I don't agree with that really, but I mean, you're playing the game. You're playing the real game. You're not playing a video game version of it. Any good World War III or modern warfare games to recommend? Scale doesn't matter. So I will mention that the World War 85 thing from Lock and Load Publishing seems to be very popular. Those people who have it have a really high opinion of it. I don't have it, and I'm not sufficiently interested in the topic to really comment on it. It is a tactical game. That is specifically why I am not interested in it. If you are interested in an operational game, then there are 2 things, both of which are from 4 things. It's kind of a field that has been revitalized in the last couple of years for reasons that are worth exploring that I don't have any comments on right now. I can tell you that I was not really 100% happy on Iron Curtain from Multiman. It's a standard combat series game. I think its leaving out of supply entirely, I think, was a terrible mistake. And for the sake of not making it too complicated, I think they sucked anything like, I don't want to use the word realism, but removed verisimilitude unnecessarily from the topic. If you want a really, really heavy, really, really big monster game treatment, then maybe you want to look at the 1985 Under an Iron Sky thing. Soon, maybe for sale. We'll see. It'll get reprinted one more time from Thin Red Line Games. But upcoming from Compass Games are 2 projects that I personally am very interested in and excited about. One of which is the new version of Frank Chadwick's Third World War series. The originally was published by Game Designers Workshop back in the 80s. That sounds right. And I've played that. That's a great game series. I expect very, very good things out of that. It will be a very large package. A much smaller and more modest package will be NATO: The Next War in Europe, which is a revision of the Victory Games classic from Bruce Maxwell, designer Bruce Maxwell. And that's coming from Compass probably sometime in the next few months. So if you want to get into that topic at the operational level, that's where I would look. At tactical level, I don't have any good informed opinions for you, but World War 85 might definitely be something you want to look at, and there's quite a bit of content on it on YouTube, so I'm turning you loose in a fertile field where you can do some more research. So I would like to once again thank everybody who has stopped by. I would like to remind you that we'll be back next week, and everybody have a great New Year's, Happy New Year, and please be safe from both the COVID and the drunks. We'll see you all next time.